like to thank everyone for coming. I'm going to assume that you're here because you want to be here and not because you were made to come here. And if that's not the case, please pretend. At some point, you're going to leave this lovely building and have to go out and figure out what you want to do. And if I can help any of you with some information at this point, I'm delighted to do so. So I am the owner of Taylor Holow Construction and Acme Panel Company. We do construction, we build high energy efficient houses, but we also take some of these old buildings that you see on Main Street, including Pulaski, that are sitting there vacant and kind of falling down, and fix them up and make them beautiful again. We have other construction related businesses, so we have a property management company that manages all the properties that we have fixed up in the various towns around the New River Valley, and we have a company that makes structural insulated panels. And if you're in the construction classes, you need to ask your teachers to explain to you what structural insulated panels are, because in 5 years, that's the way they're going to be building all the houses. So how I got to where we are, when we moved here in 2000 from California, we were living in San Francisco at the time, I started developing buildings, and I didn't like any of the construction companies I was doing business with. And so there was an opportunity to try to build a company that was a little bit different, and I took that opportunity, and we've been growing ever since. So is that enough of an introduction, or would you like?
Sure.
Okay, Mike.
Hi, my name is Mike Neeble, and I am a licensed architect in the state of Virginia and Florida. And I currently work for Shah Development. They're a development company that is actually owned by Sheeler Motor Mile. And so a lot of my responsibilities are any of the design and renovations that we do on the dealership. I'm responsible for the design and project management of them. They also own a lot of companies outside of the dealership. They own Calfee Park. I've done all the renovations and modifications that you guys have probably seen if you've been there. And the other aspect that Shah Development does is we build houses. We build spec houses, and we build about 50 to 60 houses per year. And so I'm responsible for the design and development of the construction documents for all those. I have a construction background. My grandfather, he owned a construction company and a millwork. So around the age of 12 or so, I started hanging around there a lot, seeing how the operation worked and whatnot. And by the age of 16, I was working in his millwork, basically designing custom cabinetry, custom moldings, laying out kitchens, just pretty much anything that had to do with wood. And he started introducing me to architects, taking me into their offices, and that's where my interest peaked as far as being an architect. I started taking classes in high school, drafting, and back then there was no computers. It was mainly all hand drafting and whatnot. Then I decided to come to Virginia Tech, where I got my bachelor's of architecture, and I've been around this area for the last 27 years doing architecture.
Hold on. So good morning, I'm Steve Semones with Balzer and Associates. Balzer and Associates, we're a multidisciplinary design firm, which means we have engineering, architecture, surveying, landscape architecture, planning, environmental sciences. We're about a 150-person firm. I run our New River Valley office, which is located in Christiansburg, and we have 4 other offices across the state: in Roanoke, Lynchburg, the Stanton, Shenandoah Valley area, and Richmond. What you've seen, a lot of what we do as a company, I've been with the company for 23 years, since I graduated from Virginia Tech in 1998. I started in our Richmond office in 2002, so about 4 years after I started, I moved back up to the New River Valley and started our office up here. We do a lot of single-family residential subdivision work, industrial work, commercial developments, churches. We don't do a lot of municipal work such as schools or jails, but a lot of the private development work around the New River Valley we're a part of somehow or another. We're lucky enough to work with Mike and his company as well as Joe and his company, and sometimes all three of us work together on the same project. So that's part of what we'll talk about today, I'm sure, is just the cooperation and the communication between different parts of what all three of us do. Kind of where I got to where I am, similar to Mike, I had one grandfather that was in the construction industry, had a home building company up in Hillsville. So my dad was always in construction and in sales of construction products throughout my childhood. My other grandfather on my mom's side grew up here in Pulaski County, was a teacher here in Pulaski County, and at Dublin High School for years and years, and he was a farmer. So my end of things, while Mike is on the vertical side, the building side, I'm on the dirt side. So between the construction of what I learned from my father and grandfather on that side, and the land piece of things, and the preservation, the conservation, and how to effectively build and manage land came from my other grandfather that was here in Pulaski. So as I started looking at careers and what I wanted to do, the field of landscape architecture and engineering was a really big key in what I wanted to do. So went to Virginia Tech, got my degree, and I'm doing what I'm doing now. So I run our office in the New River Valley that has the architects, the engineers, the landscape architects and surveyors. I also primarily run our civil engineering and landscape architecture department.
So one of the things I've talked to these guys about in different classes has been the possibility of job shadowing. And so when I think about job shadowing, that's a chance for a student to get like a day's worth, kind of a picture of what you do. So can you just kind of, I know that no 2 days are ever exactly alike, kind of like education, but a snapshot. So if a student were to say shadow you for a day, can you kind of give them an idea of what a day in the life of might be, just kind of your nitty gritty, what you do?
I'll start on this one. So, not a great example. Yesterday was about a 16-hour day for me. I started about 6:30 in the morning yesterday morning. A lot of us in my office, we try to get in really early because once 8 o'clock hits, phones start ringing, emails start coming in. You're responding to clients and contractors. So we usually try to get in pretty early. My quote normal day usually is we've got several meetings on projects throughout the course of the day. We're constantly running through projects that are under design. Last night was a good example. We have, as part of what I do, we do all the rezoning, so an entitlement piece of a project. So for example, if you've got a piece of open land that's currently zoned for agriculture, and you want to put a single family subdivision on that, you have to go through a process with the locality and the local governments. We recently just did one for Shah down here in Pulaski County. We were actually in this room a couple months ago doing our presentation to the Board of Supervisors. But last night I was at Town Council in the town of Christiansburg for about an hour and a half presenting to Town Council on the Marketplace, which is a shopping center where the new Chipotle and Mission Barbecue up in Christiansburg is. So if you guys are aware of that mall around or that shopping center around New River Valley Mall. So throughout the course of the day, you're spending a lot of time with staff, with your clients, and then from my standpoint, we have a lot of those evening meetings as well. But we do encourage, and we'll probably talk about this, internships, apprenticeships, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's kind of the day in the life of.
Well, I'll sort of give you my day, what I just have done today already. Got into work around 7:30. Had to get 2 or 3 items over to my boss so he can go ahead and take a look at them. They were different designs on what we can do at the Mitsubishi dealership because we're in the process of coming up to their new standards and everything. So I had to get those over there before my 8:30 meeting, which was basically about an hour-long meeting that we have every Wednesday. And we go through about 100+ projects that we have going on between flipping houses, between new houses, between all the dealership projects, the ballpark projects and everything that we have. Finished that up around 9:45, got an email got a text from her saying, "You better not be late." And
That's my husband, by the way.
yeah. And so here I am doing this, and then after this, I'm actually going back down to the ballpark to meet with a couple of our workers because we're looking at doing some more expansion, some more refinement of the ballpark, and then I'm going to hit another house that we're flipping. So I'm actually going to sit there and take some as-built measurements, which is something that as an architect I have to do all the time, and I'm pretty particular about it. That's why I don't really have other people do it for me, because I'm going to be responsible for those details and those dimensions. So I usually go out and do that myself. Then I'll get back to the office, and I've got 2 other meetings with Mr. Hagan on 2 other projects that he wants to do on the dealership, which is an expansion to the Ford dealership, and then my day will probably end right around 5 o'clock.
So my days vary tremendously because we have a lot of stuff going on, and depending on who you follow in our organization and what your interests are in your job, you get a very different set of experiences. On any given day, I could be working on construction management issues, which has to do with making sure that the men are in the right places and they have the right materials and they have all the stuff to keep our crews out in the field working, of which we have 2 to 3 crews of carpenters and general construction people. Most of my time in any given month is spent on trying to take care of all of the planning and logistics that come from taking a concept, okay, there's this old building, we want to make it into apartments, and then working to make that happen. So these 2 gentlemen right here, actually, Steve will do a lot of our site plans, Mike has done some of our architectural works. Someone's got to meet with them and make sure, okay, here's our vision, and then review all of the things they do, and then figure out how to translate that into something that actually gets done on the ground. So,
And pay us.
pardon me?
And pay us.
And pay them, yes. Yes, I do generate income for both these gentlemen. So depending on that, there's a lot of work that goes into pulling these projects together if you're doing development. You've got to figure out where you're going to get the money, and then you've got to go meet with the bankers and the various sources. Each of these projects that you do has several sources of money. You've got to meet with clients and go over their vision if you're building a house for someone else, and work out all of the details, and there are many of them, before you actually break ground and build a house. And then there's managing the people. So we're big enough, and I know Steve faces this as well. Why does he work a 16-hour day? Because he has a staff of people who are responsible for different things. So I have a property manager. And if you're shadowing that person, you'd be talking to people who want to rent apartments, talking about maintenance, talking about rents, collecting rents, and all of the things. I have a construction manager, and he's worried about where are the men, and are they on time, and are they working, and do you have enough men? But a lot of my time is trying to manage those people. I would say that if you go into the construction part, there's a lot of different ways you can earn a living. And so, what you would find during that day depends on whether you like working with your hands, or as a construction manager building the house, or whether you like working with your head and doing the planning and logistics as far as pricing a house, or trying to figure out that part of it. So I'm not sure I have a typical day. One thing you will get from all 3 of us is, if you're going to get into this business and you're going to try to move up, if you're ambitious, you'll work hard. But there's plenty of work there, and it's good work because you can actually see the results of your work manifested around you in the community. So you can go buy a building on Main Street in Radford and say, that was fallen down, and now it's beautiful. And now We've got 11 people living there that wouldn't have a place to live, and we've got some Main Street businesses, and it helps the community. So one of the things, if you work in this field, whether it be in the engineering or the architecture or the actual building, is you actually are improving the communities and you're helping people. So.
You have a question? Yes, sir.
All right, so let's say you're a business that gets paid up front for your construction work, right? And you send out a couple of your staff out there to knock out the work. And they don't finish, and they don't plan on ever coming back, but they already got the money. What do you do about that situation as a boss?
Are you asking as a client? What do you do about that?
Like if you're the boss of the, well, actually, yeah, answer both from the boss standpoint.
Well, from a boss point of view, that wouldn't be tolerated. So when we take a job, it's not that person who takes the job, it's me who takes the job, and it will get done. That's just the way, that's part of being a reputable construction company. I know that there are a lot of contracts, there's a lot of horror stories in the construction business. And for every horror story you hear, there's a guy who's working hard to satisfy their obligations and make sure that they do what they say. In the construction business, the head person of the firm is called a general contractor. And so if it comes down to legal action or enforcement, the contract dictates. So we have a philosophy at our company that we work with people who we feel, it's a two-way street. So I've got to trust the client and they've got to trust me. I believe that you work with people who you believe you can help and within your skill sets that you trust, but you also get good documents that say, here's what I'm going to do for you, for what money, by what time, under what conditions, and here are the times when, it's your responsibility to pay me, so it's a two-way street. So a good contract goes a long way towards preventing that from happening. Also selecting the right person. So finding out, if you got a project, talk to other people who work with this person, find out who they are. Most people in the community are known quantity. So if the guy's in the habit of screwing somebody, you'll know that if you ask around. Does that make sense? So I'm not sure I exactly answered your question, but the short answer is not going to happen.
I mean, there was this one time, we were trying to get Balzer side from Jose just got done doing our heating and air conditioning. Right? We're going to have the same people come back and do our site. Well, they never come back afterwards. We've already paid them, they already have the money, we already signed up the contract, all that stuff. Never came back. It was supposed to be done last Christmas.
They asked for the money up front then?
Yeah.
That's a huge red flag. So, obviously you can't go back in your particular interest. And if you want to talk about it, I know we're trying to keep this relevant to everyone. If you want to come see me afterwards, I don't know if I've got any advice, but anybody who says you need to pay me fully up front should just throw up a red flag. So we typically, on a bigger job, we'll ask for a construction deposit, which is a piece of it, but I try to make sure, I try not to put a contract in front of a client that I wouldn't sign myself if I wasn't on the other side of the thing, so I try to do it very fairly. That's not always the case, but it's okay to give the guy a little money to come and start and mobilize. They call it a mobilization fee or for a deposit for materials, but if you pay him all up front, there's no incentive. You lose your incentive for him to come back. So anyway, if you want to come see me about that afterwards, I can try
I
to.
also have another question. All right, so let's say your client isn't paying up front, right? And when the time finally comes for them to pay up, they don't got the cash. What do you do?
It is a problem. So we try to work with people. We try to do our due diligence with who we work for. Just because someone walks in and says, I have this big, beautiful project and I'm going to spend $500,000, doesn't mean I'm going to take them as a client. I spend a lot of time making sure that I check their finances and that they've got the banking and they've got the thing and that they've got the resources to the budget. It still is occasionally an issue, but because we do the managing of that up front, for that to be, we work with clients who can build what they have and who don't try to take advantage. That's most of the way we manage it. And if in fact they don't pay us, then there's a whole legal procedure where we can actually put a lien against their house and they can't borrow it or sell it without paying us off. So, we try never to do that. I think I've done it once in the last year. So hopefully that answers
I
your
got
question.
one more question.
Wait a minute.
How are you going to hate me for this?
Well, actually, we kind of need to move on a little bit, so think about keeping some of those questions to the end, because we've got to make sure that we're kind of hitting every different department.
Fair enough.
One thing I did want to tell you, gentlemen, was that these classes have worked collaboratively. Many of these classes have worked collaboratively to build a tiny house. And so we've got students in here who have done the construction part, the carpentry part. We've got students in here who have wired it, done the electricity. We've got students who are learning about building management. We've got students who are learning about designing, putting that together. So one of the questions that I actually came up with, so this is a trick question because it's not on your list. When you were sitting in these seats, we're not going to say how many years ago, what is something that you would like to have heard about this, or that would have been helpful? Kind of thinking about where they're coming from, kind of thinking about their experience, what they're doing right now. What's something that you either heard or wish you'd heard, or something that you were kind of looking forward to that might have led you to where you are?
I'll say my answer is somewhat answering one of the other questions Ms. Heft had on here. Is the biggest thing I wish somebody had told me is that you have to trust the people you work with and trust your clients. We're lucky in my business. We've got really, really good clients. I joked with Joe, but we're really lucky that we've got good clients like Joe's company that do provide work for our company and my staff. But one of the things I've struggled with as a professional is, just like Mike said, his desire to make sure the as-builts are done correctly. Work ethic is a huge, huge part of what I look for in any resume or anybody I talk to. Little things, I said my family grew up, were farmers. If you grew up on a farm and you farmed your life, I'm going to interview you no matter what. You know the value of work ethic. If you're an Eagle Scout, I'm going to interview you. But one of the things that I struggled with starting off was being able to trust the people, especially as I became more of a manager and a leader, was being able to trust my staff, to be sure they were doing it the way I wanted it to be sure it was done, to be sure it was correct. Kind of like Joe said, if there's a problem on a site, if there's a problem on a project, at the end of the day it comes back to me. So I wish somebody would have told me early on, believe in yourself and your own talents, but you have to believe in the team around you. Really early on, the earlier you can trust the folks that you're working with, the better you're going to be as a team, especially when you're working collaboratively amongst other professions and other disciplines like architects and builders.
I guess one of the biggest things that I would say is, and I had the opportunity to obviously, with my grandfather having his building construction company and his millwork and everything, I had the opportunity to go out and see stuff, but the one thing that I wish I would have done as I was doing that was pay more attention to the details. Pay more attention to how stuff is built. I mean, I got the gist of it and everything, but if I would have looked a little closer and actually saw, hey, wait a minute, that column there is holding up that beam, which is holding up the roof. At that time right there, I probably would have gotten a lot more information and retained a lot more earlier on, whereas I learned a lot of that when I got my first job. And, the architecture school, they taught me a lot, but again, they don't have the practical knowledge that experience out in the field actually gives you. So if you ever get that chance to go out there and actually just watch a house being built or watch any type of structure being built, look at how the details go together, because they're going to help you later on if that's what you end up doing, either as a designer or as a builder.
So all of you in this room have an opportunity, because you're taking classes that could directly impact your ability to get a job and move ahead. And you can't say that about every class that you take in high school, having taken high school myself. So if you're taking a carpentry class, pay attention. I will say that when it comes time to get a job interview and go talk to someone, you don't get a job from the back of the room. You have to be the kind of person who says, no, I want to do this right. And in our trades, there are people who do it right. You can learn a tremendous amount as you go if you take the initiative and you take an interest and you don't just coast, whether you be in these classes, which are directly relevant. So some of you are probably taking drafting, and being able to read a set of plans, and everybody knows there's one guy who doesn't care and is just trying to get through the time, and then there's another guy who knows his stuff, okay? And you can be the kind of person who knows their stuff, and what that means is people are gonna come to you, and that means you're gonna be in demand when it comes, so I need people who can read plans. I need guys on the construction site who can read a plan. Guess what? If you can read a plan, you can, it puts you in a position to lead a team. If you can lead a team, then you're a manager. Then your salary goes from an hourly rate where I pay a guy to show up at 8 and he walks off at 5. That guy might make $15 an hour to another guy who might make $30 an hour and has a future. So take an interest, okay? And then when you get a chance, it's easy to get your first chance in construction, okay? Work hard, show an interest, learn from the guys around you, and you can go wherever you want to go. Okay? It is in your hands.
So we've got people in here, some who are thinking of going straight into the world of work. And I know some people ask me about the possibility of apprenticeships after graduating. Apprenticeships with the plan on going straight into the workforce. Some people are looking at doing like a 2-year program. We've got the Workforce Development Program over at New River. Or the 2-year program where you might transfer into a 4-year school. And others I know are looking at going straight to a 4-year school when you graduate. And so one of the questions that I've got is maybe not even right there in your office, but in your field. Are there specific jobs that you have, Ms. Fortier, I know that you probably have a whole variety of people at all sorts of different levels. Mr. Neeble, I know, works with people on the ground crew, just with all sorts of different experience levels. Mr. Semones, so what can you say to some of these guys based on whatever those particular plans might be? I know that there's not just one route to get where you might want to be, but what can you tell them that might be available based on those different levels of education?
So, I have people on my crews who have done pretty well, who have not gone past high school, who have started working and done, like I said before, where they've earned their way up and they've learned as they've gone. I had a construction supervisor, 72 years old, who didn't finish high school, and he was great because he had the right stuff. You can do that. You can start working out of school, go get yourself hired, particularly if you're taking a trades class. I encourage you that if you're interested in electrical or plumbing, you can make a lot of money with a good life as an electrician or a plumber in the New River Valley. You can work a moderate work week. You don't have to start it. Steve and I, and to some extent Mike, we have to behave the way we do because we're ambitious and we're business owners, and that's okay. But if you want to start at 8 and work 5 and have your own work truck, an electrician does that, and they get paid well. So I would encourage you to take advantage of that if you're interested in that. If you're interested in the high-level executive positions, the Myers-Briggs Construction School at Tech is an excellent construction management program. And the graduates, if you're willing to travel, and you will have to travel, you'll probably have to move when you get out to DC or Charlotte or some other thing, but you can make really good money. They also have a property management program over there that places people. I've had people who I know go through these programs. So you can start at any level. You can start working with your hands, and you can go all the way up through in the construction side.
So with our company, with Balzer and Associates, most of the folks in our company are licensed professionals. So to become a licensed architect, engineer, landscape architect, you do have to go through an accredited program in college. I will say we have started over the last couple of years a true apprenticeship program for our surveyors. So if you're interested in surveying, some of our greatest Americans, our early presidents, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, were surveyors. So surveying is a great field. So we have our department head in our survey department had gotten his associate's degree from New River. He was a Christiansburg High School grad. So you don't need necessarily a college degree. There are a few colleges, there are none in Virginia anymore, that have a survey program. East Tennessee State does. And we do get a lot of grads from ETSU, but with surveying, you can actually work your way into becoming licensed. So after a certain amount of years working with a licensed surveyor on a field crew, you can actually sit for your land surveyor and training exam, and then a couple years after that, you can sit for your final land surveying license. So that is one, and we do have an apprenticeship program that we work. We just had our first apprenticeship, a student in Roanoke County that was an apprentice with our survey department in our Roanoke office. So he went through the full process. He got paid as he went through this. You spend a couple days a week with our surveyors working on the field crews or working in the office. So we do have that available. That is set up structurally within our company that we've set up through the state. So if anybody's interested in surveying, I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards.
In architecture, there's not as much diversity as probably Steve's company has, because obviously they have a lot of disciplines and everything. But with architecture, there is, obviously I had to go to get my license and everything. I had to go to an accredited school, like Steve had said and everything, and I had to go sit for the exam. But there are also a lot of other people that I know that work for other companies. I don't have anybody working for me right now. I do all the work. But there are other companies, architectural firms, that actually, they have a lot of draftsmen that go to a two-year program with Jeff Levy over here at the community college and everything, and they do very well. And just being able to have that as an opportunity is great. So.
All right, I know one of the questions that I got from a lot of different people had to do with what is on most young people's minds, and it's show me the money. So when you're looking at the different levels within your companies, can you share maybe what a beginning salary might be based on different education levels or different certifications? I know some of these guys, with the opportunity to test for different industry certifications, they're going to have certain licensure by the time they graduate. So can you just give kind of a brief, this is about ballpark what somebody might, company might make?
So if you're coming out of an accredited program from college, from a four-year college, and you want to step in to be an architect or an engineer or a landscape architect in our company, you're probably looking in the starting range between $50,000 and $60,000 a year. If you're looking at a survey field, again, it's dependent upon what your background is. So if you're coming in green, like we were just talking about, without the education piece of it, that's very similar to what Joe was saying from a construction standpoint. It's a field position, and you work your way up. So from an hourly wage into a salary wage. Now, after you're there for a few years, obviously the way, as you gain more experience, at least the way we work corporately, every year we do peer reviews and employee reviews, and salaries are adjusted every year for inflation and good performance. We do a pretty lengthy review on every employee in our company, and the bosses, the department heads, make recommendations on what those salaries can get up to. But in today's workforce, in the professional world, after a few years in, if you're a hard worker, if you're committed to what you're doing, especially if you're working towards getting licensed, you can be making in the six figures before too long. It's all about hard work, and it depends on the company you're working for too. We really push any of our staff until you reach a certain level of hourly. So even if you're coming out of a four-year degree, you're still an hourly employee, but we do that because we pay overtime. So any hour over 40 hours, you're getting paid time and a half, and we found that really allows folks, especially if they're coming out of college with student loans, to work as many hours as they want to on a job to make that money, to help them, get ahead, especially their first few years out of college.
So I'll just give you some ranges. If you just come in and you want a job and you have very little experience, but you're ready to start working, we will start you as a laborer in the factory or on one of our crews. And generally, we try to start people around $12 an hour. That's kind of our minimum. We pay more than minimum wage. People work hard, and if they're good, we want them to make that money, and if they're not good, we don't want them on the crews. So that's kind of where you begin. When you start learning some skills, you know, how to cut wood, how to frame a little bit, how to help, how to be useful on a cutting table, how to measure stuff, when you pick up some skills and you demonstrate yourself, we'll pretty quickly, if you have any initiative or skill at all, we'll take you up to $15 or $16 an hour as what we'll call a journeyman or a kind of a learning carpenter, apprentice carpenters. Carpenters make anywhere, depending on how good they are, framing carpenters and construction carpenters, these aren't finished carpenters, make $20 to $25 an hour, which adds up. And if you're in the trades and you're good, so if you're an electrician, a plumber, you could put a specialty painter in that if you're really good and can cover a lot, or some of these other trades usually get about $25 to $30 an hour, depends. And then when you get to the management, all of our crew managers, they probably start around $52,000 a year, and they work their way up to, I think the highest is around 70, and then depending on how you go up through management from there, it depends. So like if you go to a big construction management firm, you can make really good money, so you can make six figures pretty quick. If you run your own construction business, and one of the things about construction is there's a lot of small firms and not very many large firms, you can make as much money as you're competent enough to get. Right now there is a tremendous demand across every single part of the construction industry. Big companies, small companies, trades, workers, managers, the people just aren't there. And so, wages are going up. And so.
For you guys come in.
As far as architecture goes, obviously, it all depends on experience. As far as drafting goes, if you were to take your class and you really excelled in your class and everything, you could walk out of that class and be making anywhere from $12 to $16 an hour to start off, and work your way up to exactly what Steve had said, to a salary position and everything, with the experience that you with more experience as you're building or designing stuff. As a licensed architect, you would start out around probably about $60,000 around this area, and you can work your way up after years of experience and everything. You could be up over six figures.
So we're like winding down. Don't start packing up just yet, but it's time that I want to get some questions from you guys. I saw a hand up. Did you have questions?
How do you deal with unexpected storms of any kind or flooding?
Okay, so things that are going to get in the way of moving forward with the building. How do you deal with unexpected storms, flooding, issues like that?
So from an engineering standpoint, that's a pretty easy, I say it's easy answer. When we're designing a site, a subdivision or a commercial site, there are certain state regulations that we have to design to for erosion and sediment control and stormwater management. So when we design a set of plans, we have to design to those standards. We submit those to, for example, Pulaski County and Department of Environmental Quality. They do the plan review on that. And then each of the localities, anywhere around the state, they're required to have inspectors that are out on site, looking at soil movement. If you get a heavy rainstorm, or the sediment measures or sediment trapping measures in place, are you having a blowout? Are you silting in a creek? Are you tracking mud out onto a road? So a lot of that is handled through the plan review process and the inspection process from a design perspective.
So what happens to you guys when you get lots of extreme weather?
Everything happens. Clients start screaming at you. So the biggest issue is extreme weather events. So if it's raining for a long period of time, sometimes it's hard to work. You can't work outside in the rain. You can work outside in the light rain, but sometimes it's unsafe if you're building. There are horror stories of job sites that have just turned into mosh pits, and the equipment getting stuck on the axle. You can't drive the forklifts to pick up the pieces. The material is stored improperly, so it's sitting in mud, so it swells. So when you go to work, there's a bunch. we try to manage our projects as well as we can and look at the weather in advance and at least be prepared of it. I'm not going to say we're perfect at it, but you don't want to be planning what you're going to do with your crew because it's pouring rain. When it's pouring rain, you want to be looking that there's a rainstorm coming in the night before and saying, okay, guys, maybe we work Friday instead of Tuesday. And it's really great if you have some indoor work and your outdoor work so you can flex the crews between the two, but that's not always the case. So, on a job site, you try to manage it as best you can. Sometimes, like, you'll have to come in and you'll have to call for stabilization. You'll have to say to the client, we need to bring in a bunch of rock to fill around the site because I can't move the equipment. We have to do that down in Floyd. But most of it is you try to plan ahead and just get in front of it. And then, obviously there's stuff coming up, and then you just look at it and you try to find the quickest way to get through it. Putting a contingency in all of your budgets is really important. For things like that, for unplanned, contingency is just for that, stuff you can't anticipate. And so, in the budget, you want to have 5 to 10%, okay. You don't know what it's for, but if, it floods, you can use that money to try to fix it.
Whereas we love snow days, they probably do not love them as much.
Don't want
Mike, you had an issue one time, didn't you, when you were working on the ballpark where all the flooding made your crews totally have to switch their focus for a little while, didn't you?
Yeah, we did.
Down there at Calfee Park, because we're up on top of up on the side of the hill and everything, and there's a creek that runs through there and runs underneath the field and whatnot, and we had so much water come on down that they had the whole field flooded and everything, and actually we had a swirling whirlpool up at the top of one of the drop inlets, and needless to say, after that happened, we had probably about the next week and a half, 2 weeks of cleanup, and then it turned into a design problem that we had to get an engineer to go ahead and figure out what the problem was and how we could fix it. So.
Do you guys have any other questions right now? Are any of you guys interested in speaking with them a few minutes afterwards about, we've got several seniors in here, maybe about apprenticeships or job shadowing opportunities. Let me ask you guys really quick. For job shadowing, especially when it comes to some of the construction stuff, is there an age limit? Do they have to be 18 to come and do a job shadow?
We've never done one. And so I'm willing to talk to anybody about job shadowing. I'm also willing to talk to anybody who wants either summer work or work after graduation. Because we're always looking, the construction industry runs on bright talent, and then, you kind of make your way from there. So,
What was your question?
I've seen things like that before, where how water can get under the ground or the soil and things that flow off. Does that ever happen maybe on the ballpark, where you got under the field or anywhere around it, and it makes a problem with
No, it did not happen.
The question was, did water get to the point where it created an even bigger problem other than what they saw initially?
I'll say yes and no. It may have happened before. I have been associated with them. They bought the ballpark about a year before I started working with them. And within that 1 year, I know they put in a whole irrigation system and a whole drainage system and everything, because they did have problems like that where the water just couldn't get off the field. But if you actually look at that field, you'd be surprised to know that from home plate to left field line, the field actually drops 5 feet. Yeah, if you ever go out there and actually look at it and everything, just look at it, it actually drops. So it helps drain all the water off towards the, basically down the hill.
So next time you guys go, I will challenge you to look at it from a different point of view than simply watching it from a baseball game perspective. You want to say something? So guys, we're about to shut down. When you leave, please do so in an orderly manner. Don't trample each other on your way to lunch. But I appreciate the time that these guys have given us. I'm hoping that you guys have heard something of interest to you. If you've got some questions afterwards, stick around. But I would appreciate you guys helping me thank them for their